Hi, I'm Rob. I make it better. That's what I do. So, if you're a parent and you have a kid that have reading difficulties or dyslexia, this is the way to help them. And I wanted to go in depth here. So, what you're going to do is to teach them using feedback, because I think a lot of people are confused about how do you go about this. If you're trying to tell a dyslexic how to do things, it won't work. You have to give them raw feedback. And what we're fixing here is to teach first the skill how to read, which people in the field of dyslexia doesn't know how it works. How do you actually understand something you read? You just do, unless something has happened. And there's 3 steps here. There is a encoding of word, there's a retrieval of word, and there is a verification of word. If those 3 doesn't work, you usually have a reading difficulty or even being dyslexic. So, as a parent, what you do is you start with establish a baseline. You show your kid if they recognize this word, usually they do. Put it down, ask them to spell it out loud, C-A-T, T-A-C. And what you listen for is how fast improvement they do, right? Usually what they start out with, because they're not used to do that, they probably spell something like cat, like C-A-T, or C-A-T. And when you ask them to spell it backwards, they may say, take a moment or two, T-A-C. Either way, what you're listening for is that they go faster when they spell, because you first have to establish a baseline for them. The baseline is the word cat. Now, the second thing is, once you ask them to spell the word, to spell it out loud, you ask them, was that correct or not? And you have 3 possible answers. Correct, not correct, free, they're unsure, doubt, and they can spell it and be correct about it, but they think they did it wrong. Verification process. So you need to improve that, and you just repeat this until they can spell cat backward and forward, and then you obviously run the checklist, that the word is, and the letters are, the size that they're supposed to be, and so on. And people have different sizes, I met one kid, he had, I think it was about 4 meter big letters, 20 meters away. And that was not, helpful when you're going to read. So once you've done this, ask them, spell it, and ask them if it was correct or not. And if it was, you give them feedback. Now you repeat this until this word is well established, they can spell it forward, backward, they have no trouble with it. Then what you do next is then give them and take a new word, like which, depending on which you want to, be wicked about, I guess. You take a new word, and the way the brain works is that I didn't have the opportunity to work with kids, every day. I had to do 1 hour or 2 hour sessions. As a parent, you have like 5, 10, 15 minutes you can do, and because you have access to your kid every day, right? Hopefully. So, because most of the learning happens between sessions, because your brain has to build neural pathways. So once you have established the baseline cat, you start with a new word. They may struggle. You do the same procedure, show them the word, ask them to memorize it, and then spell it out, And then you ask a question, did you do it, was that correct or not? And they will give you feedback if it was or not. And since you already have the word in front of you, you can say, was that correct or not? And they say yes, and you say, no, it wasn't. And instead of explaining it, which is very easy to do, to start doing if you're a parent, you want to help your kid, I understand that, but you don't need to. You just show them the word. No, it was not correct. Can you identify what letter you missed? Sometimes they can do that, sometimes they cannot. And that's okay. You just repeat the process. If at any point with a new word they get, frustrated or such, stop, take a break if you need to, and repeat this word. So I just go back and forward with, the new word, baseline cat, repeat cat a couple of times, backward and forward, take the new word again, and repeat back and forth like that. And at some point, your kid will have 2 words he can do like that. And he can verify that the word is correct spell. That means you have fixed the encoding, you have fixed the verification, and the retrieval process, doing so with 2 words. Once you start with the 3rd word, and my experience over the years has been, once dyslexia do 3 to 5 words, your brain start to catch on and start updating itself. And this is what everybody does in any country of the world. This is what they do. When they read something and the word is not spelled correctly, they adjust what they see so it's supposed to be spelled correctly in their own heads. If you can't have a trouble, seeing the word, some people say, they're word blind. They're not. Ask them to, visualize, if you like, that word. See a computer screen or a TV screen or something like that. Usually they can't because they play a lot of video games. And they go, yeah, I can do that. I had 2 kids over the years and they couldn't, they couldn't see the word. And I said, you play video games, you can see the monitor, and you put the word in the monitor in their head. And then they could do it. That's a visual overlap, technically, right? So, well, if you get frustrated, you don't need to work more than 5-10 minutes, since you're going to probably do it every day, because most of the learning happens between sessions. And the reason for that is because your brain has to build neural pathways, and that takes time, a lot of time actually. It doesn't go fast, and then it has to reinforce that. So you don't need to spend an hour or 2 every day, 5, 10, 15 minutes is well enough. And you just go, when you start a session, you go, the drill. And you spell C-H-E-T-C, correct? Yes. And then you take the next word, whatever that might be, which. They go W-I-T-C-H, And then they have to spell it backward. And then you check every time you ask them the question, was it correct or not? And you have 3 answers, yes, no, maybe, unsure. Sometimes they can, spell it correctly, but they're not sure because the verification process is not fixed. So that's basically, this is all you need to do. Repeat, and give them feedback. But you can't tell them how to do it because that won't work. Because everything we do is a skill set. And if a dyslexic or a reading difficulty person, as your kid, they understand what you want them to do, but they can't do it. You need to build the skill. This is how you do it. And my experience over the years is 3 to 5 words is usually enough to start this process, so they start automatically update themselves. And people in the field of dyslexia have the problem is that they develop a lot of theories. They have, I think, 6 dominant theories why you're dyslexic. All that doesn't matter. Basically, it's just 2 dyslexic versions I know about. Either your kid have everything they need to be able to, read and spell, but it's not organized properly. This method, this process, fixes that easily. And you can have, if your kid is lucky to be one of them, you're going to get fantastic results in the first week alone. Just saying. The second example is when your kid, you need to build a memory skill function for them. That's why the repetition and feedback and repetition and feedback takes time. And I work with kids, showing the word cat, take the new word for an hour or 2. Come back the next session, and then they start to work. And at some point, the parent, they can just read them. And it doesn't require much more than showing the word, ask them to spell it out loud, C-H-E-T-A-C, was it correct or not? Yes. And if it was, you give them, yeah, that was correct. And if they spell it and they tell you it's correct and it's not, you tell them that. You don't need to explain why. Oh, no, it was not correct. Show them the word again. And you can ask them, do you notice what letter you missed? Because some words, it's very easy to miss some letters. And then people will say, well, what's going on here? Well, this is the way people learn to read in any country in the world. This teaches you how other people read and fixes, you know, when they read something and they go, is that supposed to be spelled like that? And they check a lexicon and go, oh, yeah. Or they ask, you know, a friend, oh, yeah, that's the proper spelling. And you go, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't spell it like that. So, because I'm speaking two languages, I speak Swedish and English, you know, I had to learn how some of the letters in English, you know, adding an E and an E, or, you know, in the middle of the, you know, word, I'm like, why do they need to do that? One of those funny things in other languages. So, if you do this and follow this, you should have, you know, great result in first week, maybe a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, depending on what kind of conditions, you know, what's going on. Because you're teaching them a skill. And teaching a skill is basically based on feedback, proper feedback. Because you don't need to explain to them why they were right or why they were wrong. They just building the skill. As soon as you show them the word and you go cat, T-S-E-T, C-T. And you ask them, was that correct or not? Yes. I repeat that question. Ask them. Get the answer. And what you will notice with your kid, once you've done this the first week, they go from spelling cat, maybe C-A-T, to C-A-T, or T-C. They go faster and faster and faster, but they spell it out loud like that. That's how we measure it. And once they have 2 words, yeah, you're going to get going, because the third word is going to go faster. And then 4 or 5 might be needed, you know, depending on, you know, condition for your kid and all that stuff. And then at some point, the brain kicks in and they know how to update the words. That's how you learn to read. People don't know that. My sister's husband actually had, I talked to him about this work I did with kids and dyslexia and such, and have to work on it. And he was telling me that he was reading very slowly. And, you know, he's, you know, in his 60s. And I look at him, what do you mean by slow? You have to ask questions like that. And he said, well, I read 1 letter at a time. And I said, show me. And put out the newspaper, and I said, you know, this takes a long time. And he said, well, you know, yeah, I don't read the newspaper in the morning. He reads the headline in the morning. That's all he could, you know, manage. And I looked at him and said, now here's what I want you to do. And I told him specifically what to do. And it took 2 minutes before his brain basically, you know, mind blown, because he could read whole words and whole sentences, you know, instead of a letter at a time. And he was absolutely mind blowing, you know, what, you know. So he went from, you know, he could read in a way, it took so, you know, fucking forever, to reading books. About 6 months later, he was here with my sister. We had some coffee, and my sister started talking about, you know, I'm in a book club. You know, and then she tells her husband, and you know, he's reading this book, and I look at him, you know, oh yeah, I'm almost finished with it, because it took him before I intervened. It took him 3 months to read a magazine of cars. He liked cars, rally and such, driving fast, I guess. It took him 3 months to read through one of those, because he had an interest of that. Now he was reading books. And he was like, yeah, big deal. And I looked at him and said, you do know I understand how fast you were reading before and what you're doing now. And he kind of looked at me and go, because once your brain can do it, there's no more problems. One of my students, I taught this stuff, you know, to, when he was working with a kid. She went to Danderous Hospital for a diagnosis. She was, you know, classified as a dyslexic. She found my student, and he was doing this with the student, with his client, sorry. Word and sentences order and sequence, proper order. And so he did this. She went back to Danderous Hospital, did the dyslexia test and diagnosis again. And the testing lady was, after a while, she was like, what are you doing here? You're not dyslexic. Because when I met people in the field of dyslexia, they told me, if you have dyslexia, it's for life. And I was like, no, it's not. You're wrong. What would you have Because the reason why they say that is because they don't know what to do about it. They can diagnose you in 6 different ways, I guess, but how do you actually read? This is how you teach your kid how to actually be able to read and spell. And it's fun, because you don't need a lot of skill. You only need to be able to follow instructions. Show them the word, memorize it, kid, right, you got it? Yeah. Put it down, ask them, spell it out loud. You listen, you ask them, was that correct or not? And they say yes. And you tell them, yeah, it was. Now, and then you take the next word, and you ask them to, because they have trouble with that, you ask them to memorize that and repeat the process. And you ask them, spell it out loud, and you ask them, was that correct or not? And usually it's not. Sometimes it is. So you're clearing up verification process, your encoding process, and your retrieval process. Because when they look at the word, they can see it. Then they have to go inside and verification. And if the encoding retrieval is not working, this is where things go wrong for a dyslexic, if you didn't know. And if you're dyslexic yourself, you know this stuff. You can see the word and you go, okay, I can see it. And then you try to recall it, retrieve it. Now the encoding and such is not working the way it's supposed to, because the skill is, for whatever reason, is not working the way it's supposed to. You get stuck. It's a way to say it, at least. And then once you start doing this, and you have a parent to help you. And remember, if you're dyslexic and you understand, because you understand this, your parents wants to help you, and they will probably overdo things. They will try to, at some point, try to explain to you how to do it. Just tell them, no, mom, dad, just give me the feedback. That'll be enough. I can't do what you're telling me to do. I understand it, but hey, that's how you do it. And I know it sounds too good to be true, but hey, it's for free. What can I say? I give it away. Learn to do it, apply it, boom, your kid won't be dyslexic anymore. Because this is how people actually learn to read. They don't know it. People who might be a professor with tenure or an expert on dyslexia, they don't know how they read. They just look at the text and go, okay, I understand it. Yeah, but how do you specifically understand what you actually read, and can comprehend the comprehension of reading, so you actually understand the meaning of the sentence in the books? And people go, well, I can just do it. And that's what's going to happen to your kid. Once you apply this for your kid, that's exactly what's going to happen after a while. Your kid will just go picking up a book and read, and you're going to look at them and go, what are you doing? What? I'm reading. And you're going to look at the kid and go, what the fuck? It's usually the response I get. I had one-day courses. I had people coming in with the kids, and I said, and I asked them the question, do you think this is going to help? And they said, well, I'm just upfront about it. Well, you have to try everything, they said. How long have you been trying to help your kid? 5 years? You're lucky, I said. How? Because today your kid is going to get help. And I take the kid and run this process live in front of all the people, and just, so when everybody comes back after lunch, they apply this for their own kid, and many of the kids could read already. I was out listening, okay, do this, and the kid, they were doing it correctly, but the kid could already do it. They were reading now. They were not dyslexic anymore, or whatever you call it nowadays. And that's, seems too good to be true until you apply it, because this is how people learn to read and reads. You need to have a memory skill of this to be able to retrieve, and then you have to have a memory, how to update your memory of how words are supposed to be spelled so you can encode it correctly. And once it's, correct, you can always do it. It's like riding a bike. Once you fix it, boom. You're not so dyslexic anymore. Pretty amazing, actually. It's very, very, sometimes was, parents, they looked at me and go, what just happened? And I said, well, this is what I do. And I mean, they have been, I understand, because they've been everywhere, right? But maybe you too, you sort out the experts, the doctors, pedagogues, various technologies, and then you find this and you just apply it and works and you go, what the fuck, man? That's usually the response I get, because the kids can read now. I did a lecture, this is over 20 years ago, and I had 7 teachers in the room. I had bunch of about 50 people there. And I usually, okay, so do we have a kid here who's dyslexic, by the way? And one, family, raised their hand. Oh, my kid here, he is dyslexic. And I put him up on stage and, did my thing. It took 45 minutes and, he could do it, right? And the week after, he told his mom he wanted some money. And she was like, what do you need money for? I need to buy some books. And they've been trying for 5 years. They had everything, every pedagogue, they had every, assisting aid with computers and all that stuff. But now he didn't need all that because he could read. But there were 7 teachers in the room, and none of them asked me how I did what I did. And they could have actually learned to do it, but instead they went with, I guess, something else. Don't do that. So if you're dyslexic, ask your parents, and make sure your parents are not dyslexic themselves. Which won't be good, because even if you have the sheet answer here. So make sure if you're a parent, that you don't have any difficulty reading this, because you have to verify it in real time. But if you do this for a few minutes every day with your kid, you will see progress very fast. All right? But the point I'm trying to make here today is a very important point, is that you have to give them the feedback back and forth like this. Baseline word, cant, new word. If they get frustrated, go back to baseline word, repeat it, because you want to make it easy for them. Once they have the skill down, 3 to 5 words usually is enough. You're going to see some fantastic results. So yeah, good luck. And I read about, today I just read Keira Knightley, the actress from Pirates of the Caribbean, all that stuff. She's dyslexic. We have Swedish royalty like Princess Victoria and such, all dyslexic. If they apply this, they wouldn't be there. Dyslexia is not alive. I actually told someone who is an expert in the field of dyslexia that that's impossible. And I said, yeah, this works. Go work on your kid now, right? So I can take a break and have fun. Most importantly, that's having fun.